And it's how well can you capture the value of that ingredient throughout that process to ensure that you get the expected outcome or the response of that animal. So that's precision nutrition.
Hi everyone and welcome to the Pet Food Science Podcast, where we seek to discuss current research and how it may apply to innovation in the pet and nutrition industries. I'm your host Julia Pezzali, and today I have the distinct pleasure of speaking with Dr. Neil Jaworski about the topic of leveraging expertise in precise nutrition for livestock towards companion animals. Welcome, Neil, to our podcast.
Thanks, Julia. Really happy to be here with you today.
Yeah, and before we talk a little bit more about the topic of precise nutrition, do you mind telling us and our audience your background and how we end up in your current position today?
Yes, I'm Neil Jaworski. I'm originally from near Chicago in the United States, where I grew up going to the Brookfield Zoo a lot, and that's where my passion for animals came from. And my grandparents also had a farm, a crop farm in southern Illinois, and that's where my passion for agriculture came from. So then I went to the University of Illinois to study animal science, combining those two passions, so animals and agriculture. And then I fell in love with nutrition courses, and I was good at them and enjoyed them. So I pursued that further, had some internships in the swine industry with United Animal Health that also gave me more experience in research and nutrition research, commercial scale swine production, that then made me go towards a master's degree and eventually a PhD degree with Dr. Hans Stein at the University of Illinois. And both of those were really focused on how does the pig utilize dietary fiber? How does the pig get energy from this fiber? And from there, then I moved to the Netherlands, where I became a researcher with Trouw Nutrition, a Nutraco company. So I was researching feed ingredient evaluation for pigs and poultry, and that's really my passion. And so I pursued my passion that I learned at the University of Illinois to Europe, because the Dutch are world famous for utilizing and evaluating many different raw materials. So I wanted to learn all about that and get that experience. And after a couple of years in R&D, I moved to our global nutrition and formulation team because I saw this was the avenue to really apply the research and the knowledge and empower the nutritionists and formulators that are out in the field using that knowledge to make the best cost or the best formulations for their customers, for our customers. And more recently, about a year and a half ago, became the head of our global nutrition formulation and modeling team. And that's been a great experience, bringing the modeling aspect together with nutrition and formulation to really drive the value proposition that we bring to our customers at Trouw Nutrition, really focused on livestock feeding, but we're supporting formulations and nutrition for companion animals as well. So quite a broad topic, going from a very focused PhD on dietary fiber evaluation by pigs to now 1 hour it can be the application of copper or zinc in swine feeds, and then we can get specific to vitamin B12 application in a premix for rats, for instance.
84 million times a day, pets eat meals with ingredients from Trouw Nutrition. We bring together the science of ingredients, nutrition, and blending to unleash possibilities for pet food brands. Premixes are just the start. Turn to Trouw for higher inclusion ingredients too, like proteins and carbohydrates, and highly sensitive ingredients like probiotics. With our palatants and base blends, you can feel confident about what comes in our bags and goes in yours. Learn more at TrougNutritionPets.com.
Yeah, very interesting and a very impressive background. Congratulations. And I think you're in a great position where you can see the science from beginning, from basic science, and then you can apply and see how it can impact the farmers and the industry overall. So, uh, very impressive. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about precise nutrition this podcast. So a very broad question and maybe controversial as well, but from your perspective and from what you work with, what is exactly precise nutrition?
Yeah, it probably will be controversial based on how I answer, because we also have this debate in our team ourselves, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, how I define precise nutrition, it's the most precise. So there you have precision and accuracy. So how close can you get to that bullseye every time you analyze a raw material? And then you put that raw material into a mix of other raw materials. So now you're adding error, mixing error to that as well. So how precise, how can you maintain that precision to then we also pre-discussed processing. So you also have processing technology. So you apply a lot of variation going from that one feed ingredient that you have in your silo to your complete feed product or your end product at the end of the day. And it's how well can you capture the value of that ingredient throughout that process to ensure that you get the expected outcome or the response of that animal. So that's precision nutrition. And the way we do it, in at least for swine, what I can really comment on, as that's where my expertise is, you need to go down to the digestible level for a lot of these nutrients to become more precise. You need to be able to analyze your raw materials quite rapidly. And of course, that analysis also needs to be precise and accurate. And so down to the digestion level, and then understand how did the ranking of these feed ingredients change depending on different systems or different information that you put into the flow of that system to generate your response or to get as close to that predicted response of the animal that you're targeting.
So I'd say the major goal maybe is how precise you are in providing those nutrients to the animal at a specific different targets, maybe uh, to
Yeah,
maximize good health or maximize feature cost, or but is a precision in providing those nutrients, which involve all the this whole chain that we explained, starting from raw materials, correct?
yes, that's it in a nutshell. Yeah, and I think you can even go to more precise on the location where those nutrients are available in the intestinal tract or not available to different animal types or different ages. So you also, on one side, you have the ingredients or the feed that you provide where you need to, but you also need to understand what species or life stage of that species it's going to, because you can understand that a young pig is probably going to have a different capacity for digestion compared to an older pig. So that's
Mm-hmm.
also comes into your precision nutrition as well.
Yeah, so it goes even beyond meeting those requirements. When you think about dogs and cats, is how the animals are utilizing those ingredients. It can be, it's not a static number, right? Just meeting that requirement for amino acid or vitamins, is how they're being utilized. That's going to have an impact on their overall metabolism and I assume health as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that, so you have variation on both sides, and that's the trick of capturing precision nutrition is understanding that variation and then trying to figure out where can you reduce that.
Yeah, I'll say right away, I think we have a huge challenge in the pet food industry because we don't know much about the animal requirements or the true requirements and have different populations of dogs and huge variability within just dog as a species itself. And we have a lot to learn on that side. So I'm going to kind of leave the requirements a little bit, or animal requirements or recommendations to the side, and focus more on the feed side that we can have more control at least. So in pet or pet food industry, if you want to start with a more precise formulation, you need to have a better understanding about those ingredients. And it can be expensive to analyze ingredients on a very, I would say, a frequent way. So how can the industry start on thinking about maximizing the precision of those ingredients, or how much they know about the nutrients? How often, or have you ever developed a model to understand economics and nutrient analysis in those ingredients?
Yeah, it comes with the variation. So you have to understand which nutrients are contributing the most variation to your predicted nutrients, or the more important ones. So for instance, you always have your proximate analysis, and that's the cheapest to analyze, the most rapid. So you can typically analyze those in most raw materials with a near infrared technology, or a handheld device that we now are offering. So those come very quickly and cheaply. And then you have to understand, what are you predicting from those? Normally the ones that you're predicting, like a net energy value or a energy value, can also be digestible amino acids, or even total amino acids first. So where's the variation coming from those proximates? And then you can understand where to focus. Where will you get the biggest bang for your buck? Because amino acid analysis is expensive. You, of course, can't do a digestibility trial for every raw material that's coming through, so you also have to make predictions there. And also in your energy estimates, which nutrients are playing the biggest role. So for instance, we have some cool work done in swine evaluation with energy equations. And it's quite obvious as well, but in your cereal grains, starches and fiber contribute the most variation to your predicted energy value. So if you want a more precise energy value, you make sure that you analyze starch and fibers correctly and accurately, precisely in those cereal grains, to get a better estimate of that energy value, if that's why you're utilizing it. Also, for instance, with soybean meal, we see that the calcium content can also fluctuate and have a lot of variation in that raw material. Is it worth analyzing every batch for calcium? No, because the impact on N feed is not that large for soybean meal in its contribution for calcium, but its contribution for amino acids is quite large. So it's good to have a good estimate of your approximate protein value, and then really understand the variation from batch to batch using wet chemistry for that amino acids. And then you can understand, how do I reduce this variation? How do I try to control it so that I have a consistent animal response?
Yeah, I think as you use a lot of animal protein sources in the pet food industry, those are highly variable. So there is a challenge there in most of those amino acids. And as you said, it's expensive to analyze, and the variability is high in those protein sources. Even if you get from the same plant, you can have some considerable variability that has to be considered as well. And when you talk about ingredients, beyond analyzing for nutrients, in the pet food industry, we still want to think about applied setting. We utilize apparent total tract adjustability. Um, how do you see those in ingredients? Can you do something beyond investigating beyond digestion when you think about a protein that is highly digestible? Can two protein sources, for example, be both highly digestible and still behave differently in the animal, or their kinetics, or how that can have an influence or be used to better predict or formulate a diet?
That's exactly. Yeah. Yes, I think the answer is, if you have similar total tract digestibility of crude protein, for instance, of two raw materials, that protein can be very rapidly digested in the stomach or the small intestine of an animal, or it can be the other way. It can be very rapidly or highly fermented in the large intestine or colon of the animal, and yet it will still appear as digested. And we know that the fermentation of protein will contribute a very different response than the digestion of protein and amino acids that would occur in the stomach and the small intestine. So you already know there that that is possible. So that is why on the swine side we moved to ileal digestibility of amino acids, to distinguish between those two. We also have in vitro techniques. So that's another way that I think on the livestock side, we've learned from the pet food side as well, that these in vitro techniques do give great information about your feed ingredients and are another tool to help evaluate and try to distinguish between these different scenarios. And also you mentioned the word kinetics. That's also what we are now advancing towards in on the livestock side, where we're not only looking at the extent of digestion and the location of that digestion, but now the rate. So how quickly are amino acids absorbed in one ingredient versus the other? And is that good or bad for the animal? What's the response that you're eliciting as well? Also on the ruminant side, this isn't also very new either, because they've always looked at a rapid fermentable starch fraction and a rapid fermentable NDF fraction, for instance, in the rumen. But they've also always ignored then what happens post-ruminal, or it's more difficult to predict there. So yes, you definitely can have ingredients that look the same on total track level in terms of their digestibility, and you will get a different response in the animal because it's most probably digested in a different location and at a different rate.
Yeah, very interesting. And when you did this research with livestock, maybe can you give us an example how you use maybe kinetic understanding of nutrients in specific ingredients to better formulate diets, so our listener can have a better understanding on how they can apply this knowledge in the field?
Yeah, um, one example is when we talk about gut health for pigs. There we want to limit protein fermentation in the large intestine of pigs, because this proteolytic fermentation will elicit post-weaning diarrhea, or will add to the post-weaning diarrhea problem. And so we try to steer for more rapidly digestible protein sources. So basically reducing the chances that you will end up with more protein in the large intestine of these piglets. So that's one way that we use it. And we have seen in, I think, 13 plus studies now, a 25% reduction in post-weaning diarrhea when we make sure that there's sufficient quantities of what we call fast digestible or rapid digestible protein for these piglets.
So we could potentially, beyond analyzing the composition of the ingredients, do in vitro specific models or trials to understand the kinetics of each specific ingredient and consider these kinetics to formulate diets for pets if you want to maximize maybe gut health or any other specific outcome.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you could look at coat quality in pets, for instance, or definitely on the fiber side, fiber and fat side. When you're working with high fat diets, there's probably different types of fat and the rate of digestion of that fat that would impact your stool quality, for instance, and that would be something you could steer on as a pet food nutritionist to formulate your diets.
Yeah, no, very interesting and gives another perspective for the industry. I know many companies they do a very focused job on formulation, but we still lack some basic understanding of even requirements, but also how we understand our ingredients and how they provide the nutrients. And as you said, kinetics is a little gives a much, I would say, big picture of beyond digestibility. Is not a static number, so help us understand a little bit more about what's going to happen not even during digestion, but also in the metabolism. I think one of the also challenges when I think about pet food is most of the diets that we have in the market, they are highly processed. So extruded diets, they're going to undergo high heat treatment and also high pressure, which modify that food matrix that we have, which is already highly complex. We have so many ingredients sometimes in one formula, and that very complex food matrix is going to be processed, and then we can change the biochemistry of that food matrix and nutrient interactions and losses. So when you analyze, let's say, the kinetics of specific nutrients in a specific ingredient, um, are they going to change after we process those, or how can we better consider the effect of processing when you think about kinetics of nutrients and when you think about including new ingredients?
Yes, they're going to change. The processing will change the kinetics or the rate of digestion of your feed ingredients. Same as that, it will change digestibility. So generally speaking, you get an increase in digestibility when you process of your nutrients and energy. And also in terms of the kinetics or the rate of digestion that we have looked at, we also observe increases in the rate of digestion of feed ingredients. I think it also can happen on the reverse side of things, though, as well, that you can overprocess raw materials as well. And that will, of course, maybe it speeds up the digestion, but the availability of those nutrients won't be as high, or it slows down the digestion and makes them unavailable, and then they become fermentable in monogastric species, for example. And the third thing that you pointed out was that you have that's on the ingredient level, but you also put these into a mix and then you extrude the mix. And what's the interaction between the ingredients in that mixture when it's processed? And I think that is really probably the next level, because I don't think that the processing effect for each raw material itself is additive when you have a mixed feed. That's my guess. So you almost need to apply a nonlinear concept, or something post-production that applies on the composition itself, on the ingredient mix, rather than on the nutrient composition of that mix. So yeah, then it gets very complicated, and I think understanding that variability would be something future looking for the future, to really hone in on precision nutrition.
Yeah, and even when we change ingredient A with B, you may change the interaction between nutrients in that food matrix. So it's very complex for sure. But I think having a better understanding about the kinetics of the nutrient specific ingredients is a great start beyond analyzing proximate analysis and understanding that. And I assume the industry could also evaluate the kinetics of the whole food, right, after we process. Uh, so maybe the thing is applicable as well if you change the food matrix and everything, and then we evaluate the kinetics after we process compared to before, as we have a huge impact of processing.
Yes, yeah, that's also really important. So that would be very helpful. More information to fuel that need, that understanding. Definitely, we have done that, where we formulate a complete feed for a certain amount of, let's say, fast protein, and then we're able to measure that back in that complete feed. So at least we have confirmed that these kinetics without processing are additive. And then you're adding the next layer, where now you process that mix. Is it just a factor increase, or does it depend on what's in that mix specifically to get that increase? So yeah, that would be where I would start analyzing the diets.
Yeah, and there's a, I think, huge opportunity for more research in pet food to understand ingredients processing and then the final diet. And we should go beyond, for sure, just analyzing nutrients. There is so much that happens during processing, and that huge or very complex food matrix is going to have a huge impact. So we need some modelers and more data in the pet food industry about ingredients and about um, kinetics and what happens in the animal to move towards precise formulation. Or I don't know if I have a better idea. Without data, we cannot, I assume, do precise formulation, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, you need the data, and the more data, the better. Always, that's what our approach has been. We have never tried to use the in vitro to replace in vivo data or other data. We like to use it to support or go in a different direction with in vivo data. Because
So when you said they complement each other, the in vivo and the in vitro data, so to start developing those models for precise nutrition, do you have to combine both? Do you have to validate your in vitro with in vivo trials?
I think it's necessary to understand the purpose of your in vitro procedure that you're setting up, and understand the framework that can be used in. It's the same as like a regression equation. That, let's say you get a regression equation to predict the amino acid content in poultry byproduct meal, and they develop this regression equation using 40 poultry byproduct ingredients, right? That's your framework, the nutrient composition of those 40 byproducts. And if you end up with a poultry byproduct that has a different composition than those 40, then you don't fit that regression line. So you're using it out of the framework. It's the same as the in vitro system. So you set it up within a specific framework and say, I want to understand the way we did it with kinetics. I want to understand how does the nursery pig digest certain raw materials. So my framework is an in vitro system that's mimicking the nursery pig, and then you apply that framework in the nursery pig. You wouldn't want to try to apply that in a different scenario or with a different understanding, for example.
Yeah. And I assume different physiological states, if an animal is stressed or is under a specific immune challenge, can also change how they're going to digest those ingredients and then the kinetics. And can you account for those in those models?
Yeah, you can account for anything you want. Yeah, you can always challenge an in vitro system in a certain way to try to mimic a certain scenario in the animal.
Yeah. I think one of my other questions about those models, you can account for anything you said. So how can we also think about sustainability when you think about those um, we probably can fit sustainability to precise nutrition and how we are delivering the nutrients, but thinking in a sustainable way. Can we also think about including sustainability, or have you worked with this concept when thinking about precise nutrition?
Yeah, definitely. So just thinking connected to our discussion about total tract digestibility of crude protein. Of course, the more precise you get on protein digestibility, the less you will excrete into the environment, so lower nitrogen excretion, and that already is adding to sustainability or improving your sustainability. So the more precise we can be, that means the animal will get as much or more nutrients than it's excreting to the environment, and that's really I think the most direct impact that precision nutrition has on sustainability. But now you can also think about life cycle assessments and the climate impact of different raw materials, and also their country of origins, and the climate impact from transporting that to your factory and then transporting it to your customer. So there's many aspects now coming into play that let's say impact your precision nutrition as well. So for instance, soybean meal from the US typically has a higher digestibility than soybean meal from Brazil. And also soybean meal from the US has a lower climate impact than soybean meal from Brazil. So it's also trying to say, should we steer in the direction of more digestibility and lower climate footprint? And what's the availability of that source and the cost? Because that also plays a very important factor. So these are the things that now we start to evaluate in formulation in our precise nutrition formulations, if you want to think about it. So you can start saying, in one area we will weigh a lower climate footprint, but potentially have a higher impact on becoming less precise or having more a lower digestibility value of that raw material, but we choose that because it has a lower climate impact, for instance.
Yeah, and maybe in different scenarios, you're going to have different goals and outcomes that you want to maximize, right? Maybe, as I said, in one location or formulating for a specific in target population, you want to maximize outcome, a specific outcome, and for other one, you don't. And I think that sustainability can be tricky because many times we talk about is a qualitative assessment that many people try to talk about, but you cannot measure that. So we need to move towards measuring more in a quantitative ways. What you're measuring is nitrogen, is CO2. So what specifically is sustainability for your formula for what are you targeting? And I think that's going to be a challenge in the pet food industry to quantify sustainability rather than just saying more sustainable, less sustainable. Many it can be tricky, or how companies can bring that to the formulation to the table.
Yeah, I think it will be tricky not only for pet food, for also the livestock feed industry as well, because it's all based on qualitative models, and it's also a different unit of measurement. So it's something that we're not used to seeing or having a grasp on. Whereas, like the quantity of lysine in soybean meal, we have a good grasp on what the normal value should be, and if it's high or low, or in the average range. Whereas the climate impact of soybean meal, we don't know what that value should be. So it's first, I think, we need to start using these globally agreed upon
Yeah.
calculations to get a grasp of those numbers, and then understand, okay, how do we steer our formulas in a certain direction, and then what's the impact of trying to do that. So and that would be impact on animal performance, impact on the climate change as a whole, and also impact on the supply chain. So you may see that you could make a really great shift in reducing your climate impact of your feed, but there's not enough of that raw material that you're steering your formulas towards to make it work. So it's quite a big process, I would say, that you need to carefully consider. And the final thing, and probably the most important thing, is the impact on cost. And most of the time, it will impact your cost. So that's probably one of the biggest reasons why it's maybe seems slow moving to people outside of our industry, or not so aware of this.
Yeah, and there's a debate about it, but it's sustainable if it's profitable. Otherwise, if you cannot make it work, it doesn't matter if you can decrease your carbon footprint or nitrogen excretion, but are going to be able to sell it? How is also social sustainability? So there is many other, I would say, outcomes playing a role on what is sustainability. But again, I think we have a podcast on sustainability as well here. So if anyone wants to delve more into this topic, there is a podcast on our Pet Food Science podcast too. So go more towards that one. But for sure, a very controversial topic too. But we can think about that when you think about precise formulation. So I think that's the major point here. One question that I have, Neil, was about we talk about digestion kinetics, and some can be one more or less static number, and kinetics is not static, so we are looking at movement rates of digestion. So when you think about protein quality, many times you look at digest DIAS, digestible dispensable amino acid scores, which is a static calculation or number. So how can we, when you think about protein quality, only looking at those numbers, should be looking at something else, maybe postprandial amino acid response or another outcome that you can understand better kinetics rather than just a number that is static and may not represent what's going to happen in metabolism and protein synthesis and so on.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of the kinetics research actually starts, is in human nutrition with the DIAS scores. But the DIAS score is still leading in most of those scenarios. And I think it's maybe it's the same argument that was taking place when we were developing the kinetics, is we're not trying to use the kinetics to replace the dies. For example, the kinetics would add more information to your dies, or to support or confirm your dies score in certain scenarios versus other scenarios, or different life stages versus other life stages, for example. And I think it's the same as what we discussed with the total tract digestibility of crude protein. You can have two raw materials that have very similar dies scores, but for a certain condition or life stage, when fed to whatever animal you're talking about, they can be more rapidly or slowly digested, and that most probably will have an impact on your desired outcome or the response elicited in that animal.
Yeah, I like the what you said, that the better, more information, the better, and information complement each other. It's not one against each other. It's both working together towards help us answer a question or have a better understanding about a specific topic. Another part of precise nutrition, when you think about human population, and there's a hot topic in human nutrition as well, precise nutrition, is for humans, they look more into providing precise nutrition as providing those nutrients, more tailored nutrition towards an individual, not a population. And when you think about livestock, you think about population and under different conditions. And as we think about the pet food industry or dogs and cats as individuals as well, do you think there is a place or an opportunity to look into precise nutrition to target individual outcomes or to meet a specific individual requirements or that is specific dog or cat gut health or condition or even pathological conditions?
Yeah, I was thinking about this morning when I was thinking about this podcast, because the last time I went to buy dog food for my dog, I was able to choose even different breeds that they are producing the feed for. So that's more that your tailor-made formulas or breed-specific diet. And there, I think kinetics can play a role to differentiate or to help you become more precise in feeding the different species and the different life stages that these species go through. And also definitely when you're targeting performance dogs versus companion dogs, for instance. So I've got a German Shorthair Pointer, a bird dog. So when he was younger, now he's on the geriatric aging diet. But when he was younger, I would have been looking for something that was really trying to boost his performance or support his performance in the field. And kinetics, I think, could definitely play a role there.
Yeah, and I was looking as well at NIH, and they also say the future of human nutrition is precise nutrition, and they're trying to get information from the more number of people that they can to develop algorithms that consider that specific individual microbiome requirement, nutrition, environment, stressor events, because everything is going to play a role. And that's the challenge as well when you use sometimes research dogs. We have a limited sample size, and that environment is not the same as in an in-home environment that we have so many other factors playing a role. So I also agree that there is an opportunity there to investigate um, more towards precise nutrition in dogs and cats when you think about individual, and the issue or the challenge is going to be get all the data, but there is a huge opportunity there as well. And I think if you work all together with the industry and academia and different universities, we can move towards that direction and help each other towards the common goal.
Yeah, most definitely. And I definitely will say, yeah, the animals are always an issue. The number of animals, the type of animals, the conditions. So in vitro tests really help you get more throughput. You can tailor make your in vitro system to the different conditions that you're looking for, or different breed scenarios, for instance. So lots of opportunities there, I think, moving forward.
Yeah, and I think the in vitro is going to also be part of the future of the pet food industry and dog and cat nutrition as we go more towards those precise requirements or nutrition, or even the challenge that we have with research animals and the concerns that many institutions they have as well.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Neil, for your insights about precise nutrition. I think we have a lot to learn from livestock as well, and from all the good work that you have been doing with kinetics, and how can we apply that to develop better formulas or to think differently when you formulate, go beyond just the composition of the ingredients and apparent total tract digestibility. There's so much more that we can do when you think about maximizing an outcome, or even animal health and longevity, which is a very very hard, I
Yeah.
would say, outcome to target or to think about. We still have to understand that better more. How can you target that?
ICC Animal Nutrition, a Brazilian company with 30 years of history and present in more than 70 different countries, providing natural, sustainable, and technological solutions for animal nutrition, health, and well-being in a safe and scientific way, adding value in food production and helping to feed the world. It's time for our famous three. Tired of one-size-fits-all solutions that don't quite fit? At Wilbur Ellis, we're bringing custom back to the customer. We know that for your pet food and treats to shine on the shelf, you need to start with the best. After all, even the best recipe is only as good as its ingredients. From nutrition to preservation to blending and bottling, make one call to Wilbur Ellis Nutrition to find it all. We don't sell to you, we work with you. A true partnership to meet your needs. Follow Wilbur Ellis Nutrition on LinkedIn to learn how partnering with a purpose could double the power of your team.
Well, one of my last questions are for those who are more interested in learning about precise nutrition. What resource do you recommend for them? Any book or website or anything?
Well, I'm biased coming from Hans Stein's lab, so his podcasts are the best if you want to look about digestibility and swine nutrient digestibility. But the book is Feed Evaluation Science by Paul Moen and Walter Hendricks. I think that's a great reference to have. It's from 2017, so a recent edition. And there it talks about all the different techniques you can apply for feed ingredient evaluation, and also looking at the responses and how do you get a consistent response in the animal, or also at the very beginning of our discussion this afternoon about variability in your feed ingredients and on your nutrients, where to put your money in analysis to get the biggest bang for your buck. So it's all explained in that reference.
Awesome. My other question is, as you work with precise nutrition for livestock, but I also have a dog, so I bet you think about how you apply those concepts for dogs, and you're going to the pet store and seeing all those different pet diets. What do you see the future of formulation for the pet food industry, or how do you envision that when you think about precise nutrition and you using that for livestock?
Well, there's two sides of me. I was also thinking about this because I think it's really cool that you can buy these tailor-made products for a certain breed, for instance, and different lifestyles. I think that's really cool, and as a consumer, I'm attracted to that. So that's and also as a believer or supporter of precision nutrition, and trying to think that, okay, these pet food manufacturers, they're really looking at my breed of dog and what are the nutrient needs of that dog. On the other hand, from the more practical application side of making all these tailored diets and really customizing, I could imagine that it's also a bit of a supply chain or a bit of a nightmare. You really have to have a good understanding of your customer base and the market needs, and be able to forecast and predict that well. Because if you end up producing a lot of feed for St. Bernards out of your factory in one region, and all the St. Bernards are across the country, then you're ending up having to ship all of that across the country, or these kind of things. And is it worth the return of selling that versus just having your standard large breed dog food, something like that? So that's the thing that I think about with precision nutrition as a dog owner and a pet food consumer.
And my last question is not about precise nutrition or the pet food industry. It is more about people skills And as you, as a global leader in your team or in your company, in your opinion, what qualities define a good team member? Or if you're hiring someone in your team, what qualities or attributes are you looking at that person that you know is gonna add value to your team and make them successful?
I really value people who ask questions and especially challenging questions. So ones that really challenge status quo, or it can be the most simple question that nobody has dared to ask. Those are really the skills or the qualities that I really look for in a team member, because I think then it really opens up the team and gets the right discussion going and gets everybody on the same page. Because a lot of times it's those uh, simple questions that are the most difficult to answer and spur the most discussion around the topic and get all the different viewpoints on the table to really make good steps as a team and perform well.
Yeah, I agree. And I like a quote that says, what we know is what prevents us from learning. Because sometimes we're so focused in what the book has been saying for so many years, but we have to challenge that sometimes as well. And sometimes science tells us a totally different story, and we need to investigate. But asking those questions is for sure where to start. So I totally agree with you.
Cool. I like the quote.
Well, thank you very much, Neil, for joining us in our podcast. I really enjoy our conversation, and I think you add a lot of our perspective from the precision nutrition and livestock to the pet food industry. And I hope we have a lot. I hope you come back here as well to tell more about how you're doing your job and with universities as well. And thank you again. Well, I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks, Julia. I had fun. This was great. And hope you learn a lot from the livestock industry, but also don't forget that we also learn a lot from you as well. So that's the fun thing about leveraging each other's experiences. So thank you.